9/11 changed New York. After 9/11, it became our mission to stop terrorism from happening. Fast forward 8 years later, it's the anniversary of 9/11. There was an Al-Qaeda-trained terror operative coming to New York to blow up the subways. This was as real as it got. And our job was to stop it.
As a former FBI agent and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I had oversight of all 16 of our nation's intelligence agencies. My name is Mike Rogers. I had access to classified information gathered by our operatives, people who risked everything for the United States and our families. You don't know their faces or their names. You don't know the real stories from the people who lived the fear and the pressure until now.
"9/11 was a wake-up call to the United States that we're vulnerable to terrorist attacks. It was also a wake-up call that our law enforcement and intelligence community had to work together in the future. Pre-9/11, what you didn't have is the connective tissue of information between law enforcement and intelligence community assets. And the consequence is you're not seeing what's going on inside the country, and it's not easy to connect that to outside the country. And that was noted in the 9/11 Commission report.
There's been a lot of lessons learned after 9/11, a lot better sharing of information and intelligence, communication lines being more open, walls coming down.
We're going to do whatever we can to stop terrorism. That is our goal.
The metadata program and the 702 program were enacted to protect this country from the attacks that we saw in 9/11.
Today, I'm pleased to sign landmark legislation that is vital to the security of our people. The bill will allow our intelligence professionals to quickly and effectively monitor the communications of terrorists abroad while respecting the liberties of Americans here at home.
So 702 authorizes the NSA to go after certain forms of communication, in this case terrorist communications, that are coming from outside the country to inside the country. And the metadata collection program is information about information. And what that is in this case is it's the phone number, the to number, and the from number, the date, time, group of the call, and the duration of the call. That's all that is in the metadata database. There's no conversations. There's nothing about your communication or mine. Once a number is confirmed to be associated with a known terrorist group, NSA is authorized to look in that database to see who is that individual communicating with inside the U.S. People assume the metadata program has the content of phone calls. It doesn't.
Why is everyone so scared of this?
Because they don't understand. It's sensationalized and inflamed, not informed.
There is no team of people just reading random emails or listening to random phone calls of normal citizens going about their business. There is no such thing.
Do you think these programs could have prevented 9/11?
Yes, I think both 702 and the metadata program would have stopped it. In 2009, NSA was tracking an email address in Pakistan that belonged to Sana Pakhtana at yahoo.com. This individual, Sana Pakhtana, was associated with Rashid Ralph. Rashid Ralph was a known Al-Qaeda operative. He was one of the conspirators in the attack on the aircraft coming out of Great Britain in 2006. So, Rashid Ralph and this Sana Pakhtana is communicating, and then on 6 September 2009, NSA intercepted a message from Sana Pakhtana communicating with someone inside the United States. Under the 702 certification process, we were authorized to get the content of that email. And when we read it, it had code words in it that are indicative of a terrorist act. And it had a phone number. What it didn't say is who is the guy inside the United States, where does he live, and what's he up to? So we would take that and say, this is important. So we gave that email to the FBI.
The first email that came across was from that address to a Yahoo account, njbzaz@yahoo.com. And then there were 3 emails from njbzaz@yahoo.com saying, please get in touch with me right away. I need the formula. The marriage is ready for flour and oil. The term marriage is a term that we all know and understand to mean attack. The other problem is that these emails are occurring just days before the anniversary of 9/11. Everybody was concerned that we had a major problem on our hands.
The FBI takes that email, creates a national security letter, goes out to the internet service provider to find out who is this person, what's his name, gets information back that says this is Najibullah Zazi, and the phone number is Najibullah Zazi.
And we were able to identify an address through the carrier to an apartment in Aurora, Colorado. Once Zazi was identified through the emails, we were trying to scramble to figure out everything that we could possibly find out about Najibullah Zazi. We had our Joint Terrorism Task Force working together as a team. The Joint Terrorism Task Force involves agencies from the area, state, federal, and local law enforcement agencies working under one roof. And so almost immediately, we're able to set up 24/7 surveillance on that apartment. On September 9th at about 6 a.m., Najibullah Zazi leaves the apartment. He goes over to a car rental company and rents a vehicle. It was a red Chevy Impala. Then we see him getting into the car and driving in an eastbound direction out of the city of Denver. He was on the move, going at a very, very high rate of speed. This thing is a day to a day and a half old. And there was a lot of pressure because nobody knew what was going on. I mean, is this a person that's fleeing the scene? Is he attempting to get out of town before this thing occurs? Is he going to an area where the attack is going to take place? We just didn't know. So we utilize our partnership with Colorado State Patrol.
So they have a trooper pull him over for speeding. And, the trooper goes up, looks in the car, talks to him.
The trooper was asking him questions about, where are you going? Where are you headed? And Najibullah just basically indicates, I'm on my way to New York City. I own a coffee cart business, and there's a problem with the individual who's running it, and I need to get there to figure it out and to make it right. At that point, he's allowed to leave because what do we have under which to arrest him on? There was nothing. So you're at a point where you have to allow things to play out so that you can figure out exactly what's going on. But a car moving at a high rate of speed toward New York City near the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, that does not sit well with anyone, but particularly the New York field office.
So it's September 9th, 2009. I'm sitting at my desk, reading emails, looking through papers. I get a call from one of my counterparts at FBI. And he says, do you know the name Najibullah Zazi? And I say to him, nope, never heard of it. He says, well, literally, he's coming at you at 90 miles an hour, potentially to detonate a bomb. On September 8th, 2009, I had never heard the name Najibullah Zazi. By September 9th, 2009, I knew he was a terrorist on the way to New York, likely to detonate a bomb.
I was actually an assistant special agent in charge with the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. Don Borelli was the other assistant special agent in charge. And Don comes up to me, he says, NSA got information through their technical means that this individual, Zazi, was communicating with a known Al-Qaeda email address about making a bomb and was basically coming at us at a fast rate of speed to commit an act of terrorism on the anniversary of 9/11. And I'm like, what? You know, I wasn't expecting that.
There is a huge sense of responsibility on your shoulders that it cannot happen to New York. It cannot happen again. My role in New York was to try to take that information coming from the NSA and Eric and his team in Denver, and then come up with a plan to deal with the threat to New York.
For me, it was a pressure cooker situation. By the time he started driving to New York, it was about 48 hours since he had initially came to our attention. So this was a breakneck pace that we were operating under, especially given the fact that we were 2 days away from the anniversary of 9/11.
And by the way, we also have our surveillance vehicles following him the entire way. So from Denver across the country, we have surveillance in the sky. We're doing everything we can to make sure we know where this guy is.
While Najibullah was on his road trip, we would continue our investigation. We still knew very little about him, but we started to accumulate information. We started to look at his immigration records. We learned that Najibullah was born in the northwest frontier region of Pakistan. Then Najibullah and his family came to the United States in 1999 when he was 11 and lived in Flushing, Queens.
From there, you build on what you know about these people. Anybody that touched Najibullah Zazi, we assume was radioactive. They were a potential threat.
Essentially, the NSA part was to use the metadata program and determine who else in the U.S. Zazi is communicating with to help the FBI understand who are the key targets that they have to go after.
Two of the key figures in this investigation involved Zareen Ahmadzeh and Adis Mandoonjaneen, two of his very close friends that he met in high school.
They went to the mosque together, and they got jobs in New York. Zazi had the coffee cart. Zareen was driving a cab, and Adis was a doorman. And they continued to hang out. They remained friends.
Looking at the flight manifest, we concluded that in August of 2008, before he came to Colorado, Najibullah had traveled with Adis and Zareen to the Fatah region of Pakistan, the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan.
And we thought at the time he'd gone to a terrorist training camp to receive terrorist training, bomb making. These are all the real critical pieces of information that we needed to know the magnitude of this threat.
And this has gone from a highly probable to an emergency case.
You join the FBI because you want to get in the fight. You want to take bad guys off the street. You want to capture terrorists. I never had anything like this. This seemed to be a real full-blown Tier 1 trained bomb-making guy with potentially a bomb in the trunk of his car coming into my territory with dangerous counterparts here in New York to kill people. The adrenaline just starts going through the roof.
Now it's the day before 9/11. So we start trying to game plan, how is this guy gonna make it into New York?
And so what they did was they set up individuals at all entry points into New York City.
The great thing about working with the Joint Terrorism Task Force is that you have NYPD, you have the Port Authority. So we're talking with the Port Authority cops as to what they've got to do at each of these spots.
We cannot let this guy get into Manhattan with a bomb in his car. So we need to do a vehicle stop, and we need to try to do it in such a manner to not overly raise his suspicion.
So he's coming up the Jersey Turnpike, and we've got the surveillance team calling it out. Where is he? We start at the Outer Bridge crossing. He doesn't take that. And then he goes up to the Goethals Bridge, and he doesn't get off. Then he goes to the Holland Tunnel, and he doesn't get off. And then he goes to the Lincoln Tunnel, and he doesn't get off. Well, the only place he can go now if he's coming to New York is the George Washington Bridge. I think it's 15 minutes from the last tunnel to to when he got to the GW Bridge. So in 15 minutes, we set up a game plan, which is we're going to set up a roadblock where we stop cars, and it can be for drugs, it can be for DWI. You know, these checkpoints are done all the time.
You always worry about the bad guy knowing that you're watching him. But in this situation, threat to life was paramount. And while we weren't loving the idea of a car stop, we had really no choice. We can't let him just drive into Manhattan and potentially blow something up. The last thing you want to be is responsible for another smoking crater in your city. Najibullah is driving to the bridge. It looks like he's going to come into Manhattan via the George Washington Bridge.
And we're at the day before 9/11. And so what we're really thinking about is we cannot lose this guy.
Zazi was the picture of an imminent threat. Travel records had indicated that he had been to Pakistan in 2008, potentially that he'd attended terrorist training camps with Adis Madujanin and Zareen Ahmadzai, his two New York counterparts. But we just didn't know what they were up to.
So we're going to set up a roadblock.
We were going to have the officer who had a canine search the car to try to figure out if Najibullah had a bomb or anything else dangerous in the car. So Najibullah is in one lane of traffic. You have resources following him, calling out what he's doing. Finally, somebody made the call to essentially shut the bridge down.
And as Zazi's coming up, he's pulled over. But remember, we're doing this to other cars in the line. So we're doing this to make it look like he's just another car in the line.
The Port Authority officer with the canine did a sweep of the car, including the dog smelling around the various places and nooks and crannies of the car.
We let the dog go around. The dog does not sit. The dog did not detect a bomb.
Even though he didn't have a bomb in the trunk of his car, we knew that he was dangerous. And knowing that you can build a bomb with things that are available in the open market, we thought it likely that he could get to New York and then build the bomb.
Remember, the connection with Zazi was Rashid Rauf, and their communications going back and forth. So he was talking to people who had made bombs.
And so we firmly believe that the plot was still an imminent threat.
There was a discussion at that time about whether or not we would allow him into New York City at all. New York just did not want to take the risk of something going wrong where we would have a very, very bad situation on our hands. Ultimately, the decision was made to allow him into the city to learn more about what his plan was, what he was up to, who he was going to go meet.
In this case, we took risks. I mean, there was no way around it. If we went to Zazi and said, hey, Mr. Zazi, we know that you're going to commit an act of terrorism, and he goes home, we still now have to follow him and do everything that we are doing anyway, probably for the rest of his life, because we know that he's somebody who wants to commit an act of terrorism. So we can't let him be operational, but we can let him do operational things so that we can arrest him for those.
So the show goes on. The surveillance continues with traffic and taxis and subways and everything else that goes in to try to follow somebody in the borough of Manhattan, which is not easy on a good day and even much more difficult when you think that the guy you're following is a terrorist.
So they're following him through Manhattan, through the Bronx, and we follow him into Queens.
Najibullah drives to the apartment of one of the other co-conspirators, Zareen Ahmadzai. And then together, the two of them go to the Muslim Center of New York. But we didn't know what they were up to, and if they were meeting with people, if this was all part of the plot. Surveillance is watching to see if anybody else comes and goes.
And by the way, we've got surveillance going on Adis at another location.
And then, after a little bit of time, Najibullah takes Zareen back to his apartment, and then Najibullah continues on He's going to various religious locations, and we really don't know what's going on.
Was this plot a religious plot?
No. I don't think that they were overly religious. They were Muslim, but it's really not about that at all.
There might have been religion that they could base the plot on because of injustices done to Muslims by the West. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. It's wanting to be part of something bigger. It's trying to find an identity.
The way I look at it, and it's not the FBI, this is the way I look at it, is that they haven't fully enveloped the American dream, or the American dream hasn't fully enveloped them.
They viewed themselves and they believed in their minds that they were failures in life. And I think that the Al-Qaeda members who talked to them and inspired them to conduct this attack knew that and capitalized on it.
It's terrorism using whatever tools they can to inflict harm on us and to take misguided use like that to do it. And they don't necessarily have to be Islamic. They just want people to conduct attacks on their behalf.
So the night of September 10th, Najibullah spends the night at a high school friend's house. Tomorrow is 9/11 anniversary. We didn't know what the target would be, when it would take place, who exactly was going to participate, how it was going to happen.
But there was no doubt Zazi, Zareen, and Adis wanted to kill people, and we have to prepare for that.
There was a lot at stake. Anytime that you're talking about terrorism, people could die. So you've got to be on your very best game.
We've got to control this situation. And if we can't control it, then we got to take it down, because we cannot let these guys commit an act on 9/11. It's the anniversary of 9/11. We know that Najibullah Zazi, Zareen Ahmadzai, and Adis Mdujanin want to commit an act of terrorism. Our mission is to not let that happen. So we had physical surveillance on them. We were following these individuals everywhere.
The morning of September 11, we're listening, we're watching, and Najibullah leaves the residence where he's staying.
Zazi has his rented car on a street in Queens, parked, leaves the car there, and Zazi goes on his way.
We follow him. He walks to a subway and takes a subway into Manhattan.
Weren't you worried he was wearing a suicide vest?
Based on all of the information that we had via multiple sources of information,
What kind
including
of sources?
sensitive sources, we were confident that he wasn't wearing a suicide vest, or we would not have let him on the subway. We would have stopped it right there, period.
Agents that were following him saw Najibullah go to the financial district and visit the individual who was running his coffee cart.
The FBI's got surveillance all over him, but he's not doing anything illegal. This is a guy who's looking behind his back. He's trying to see, is he being followed? Are people looking at him?
We knew that he was suspicious, obviously. He'd been pulled over a couple different times. So we didn't know for sure if the plot was still active, but I believe at that time he was essentially killing time, trying to look innocent, and Adis and Zareen were still under surveillance. So now we've got the opportunity to search the car.
NYPD comes in and they impound the car. We get it over to a hangar that's not being used. And so we can go in there and covertly, out of the view of everyone, search this car. And I mean, when I say search his car, this was a CSI moment. We have our evidence response team. They come in and they take photos of where the dirt is in the car. They take photos of where cups are in the car. So when we pull the stuff out of the car, when we're done, it goes into the car the exact same way. We were looking for anything that can make a bomb or anything that can indicate that a bomb was made. So we're looking for chemicals. We're looking for documentation.
Ultimately, searching that car led to getting his laptop computer.
And our computer forensics team basically makes a copy of the computer.
And the supervisor says, "You need to see this." And I'm thinking, oh, Jesus. The computer forensic people found a document on the computer. This document is like my organic chemistry lab notes. It's got drawings of beakers and distillation tubes and chemical formulas.
This is one of those oh shit moments. But it was a good oh shit moment because now we have something.
So I call FBI headquarters and tell them I need the chief chemist. They get the chemist on the phone and I start relaying to him what I'm seeing on this document. And within a minute, the chemist tells me this is how you make TATP.
TATP is triacetone triperoxide. Very, very powerful explosive that can be made with ingredients that are easily purchased.
It's the explosive material used in suicide vests and IEDs. It's tools of the trade for terrorists. We strongly believed before we found that document that he was the real deal. This just cemented everything that we knew.
But it is not illegal to have bomb-making notes. So at this point, all we've got is a guy who came to New York, some NSA analytics, and the bomb-making note. Could we arrest him? Maybe. Could we convict him? I can defend against that. So we're in a conference call with our headquarters. We're strategizing about how to go forward. And somebody says, we just got some bad news.
Somebody from the team had a source of information that was an imam that actually knew Najibullah Zazi, and during the investigation, the imam was contacted. We were trying to get as much information as we can. Why is Najibullah in town? What's he doing? And as it turned out, the imam was not to be trusted because after talking to our team, the imam contacted Najibullah and basically warned him that he was under investigation by the FBI.
At this point, Zazi knows for a fact the FBI was after him, so he called off his plan. So the next day, he jumps on a plane and heads back on the 12th to Denver.
He may have abandoned the September 11 plot, but he's still a dangerous guy. So surveillance continues to Denver, and then we hand him off to Eric and the other Denver people.
We have to make sure that he doesn't disappear into the wind or attack someplace else. And so we had the surveillance up because we just didn't have enough at that point to charge him with substantial crimes.
Meanwhile, in New York, we didn't know if the plot was going to continue via Adis and Zareen.
So we decided to do raids on Zareen's house and Adis's house on September 14th. We were hoping to find evidence of a bomb plot. So we get teams from all across the FBI, and then we also bring in more task force officers, NYPD, Port Authority. The teams go out and they hit the locations. At both Zareen's house and Adis's house, we found computers, and during the searches of those computers, we did find Al-Qaeda propaganda. Now, having the Al-Qaeda propaganda on your computer is not illegal, but it looks bad. By the end of the raids, it was in the news what we were doing.
FBI agents and New York police launched a series of raids early Monday morning linked to an Al-Qaeda terror suspect.
The media quickly realized that Zazi was the common thread among all of these searches that were going on, and did the legwork then to trace him back to Colorado. Media was camping outside on his lawn, knocking on his door.
You have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda?
Of course not. I have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda and any link or anything with Al-Qaeda.
With the media presence at his house, the pressure starts to build on him. And I remember our chief division counsel walked into the room and he sat down and he said, "You're never going to believe this, but I just got a call from Najibullah's attorney. They want to come in and talk." We didn't see that coming. It was about 2 p.m. on September 16th when Najibullah came in with his attorney to talk to us for the very first time. He wanted to clear things up. He wanted to talk about what happened.
Is it Najib or Najibullah? How would you like to be called?
Najibullah.
Najibullah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last name is Zazi.
Okay.
So in the room, there were 5 individuals: Najibullah's attorney with his associate, myself, and another interviewing agent. But little did he know, on the very next door, there were hundreds of people running leads, doing whatever they could in the background while I sat and talked to him.
What I think we can do today is that we just have an open discussion. Maybe we could clear the air a little bit.
He started to tell us, this is a misunderstanding. I don't know why all this suspicion is on me. I haven't done anything wrong. So I indicate to him that we found your computer. And on that computer, we found what looks like bomb-making notes. Do you know anything about this? And I can see him backpedaling a little bit. How am I going to explain that away?
I did make a mistake in one point. I downloaded one of the book. It was a long time ago. As soon as I see it, it was, and I said, this is not something that I need to see, or it has to be in my computer right away. I deleted it.
He said, I found them online and they're in a book. And we came back and we said, that's your handwriting. Then the story changes again. Well, I actually took notes, but then I realized that what I was doing could be a problem, so I tried to get rid of them. So I said, in other words, you wanted to distance yourself from the notes that you yourself took, but yet you scanned them. Why would you do that if you were trying to distance yourself from these notes? It doesn't make any sense.
I would have liked to have been there to see the look on his face. I believe that was the point in Najibullah's mind where he said, they got me.
So the proffer agreement was offered to Najibullah, and that's essentially an agreement that he signs to be completely honest with us. But then none of his statements can be used against him, but they could be used for purposes of following up on various other leads that we had. So he would come back again the next day and the day after that. And I asked him about his trip to Pakistan. He had indicated that he was going to see his family, but then he came in contact with an individual over there who was an al-Qaeda figure. That person talked to him about conducting an attack here on U.S. soil, and it interested Najibullah very much.
Why would he tell you that?
I think he realized I was taking an interest into what he had to say. I don't think throughout his life that anybody really listened to him about anything. And so, according to Najibullah, in August of 2008, he attended the al-Qaeda training camp. The camp was about 2 weeks, and it was learning hand-to-hand combat, small arms fire. And part of that training also involved an explosives-related course on TATP.
TATP is an extremely volatile, explosive material. The main ingredient being hydrogen peroxide, which can be purchased in a beauty supply store.
And we were able to obtain video surveillance of him from 2009, walking around in the beauty supply warehouse, pushing a cart around with up to 12 bottles of very, very highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide product.
He had actually rented a hotel and gone there and done the chemical combination, and a couple of times it didn't work. And then it did work on the final time. After it worked is when he started traveling to New York.
He went from a normal guy to a full-blown, real-life terrorist with the training and the tools and the intent to kill people, to kill his neighbors, to kill fellow citizens.
Najibullah talked to me relatively stress-free about his attending the training camps, what he was going to do. But remember, we couldn't use his statements against him. But we knew that we could use any sorts of remnants or evidence that were found. And so while we're talking, a team was deployed to go and search that hotel room up and down and thoroughly. We were looking for certain materials that would actually, as he was cooking down, materials would go up into the vent. And as you swab the vent, some of those materials still existed in the vent. And so all of that was being evaluated to make the overall case. But We knew about his friends Zareen and Adis. And as I led him down the path of talking to me about their potential involvement, he was very uncomfortable about doing that.
It was almost like they were non-existent in his telling of the story.
And so it was at that point that we called off the interview for the day. And the following morning, his attorney called and said, "We are done. We're not talking anymore." And so by that evening, we were en route to his house to arrest him.
Breaking news out of Aurora, Colorado. We are just learning that U.S. resident Najibullah Zazi has been arrested just moments ago by the federal authorities.
Based on what we had accumulated, formal charges came from the Eastern District of New York. These charges consisted of weapons of mass destruction, preparing for use of a WMD.
I was happy to see Najibullah arrested, but Adis and Zareen were still under investigation here in New York.
They are part of the conspiracy. We know that they wanted to be terrorists. So the case is not over. Zazi gets arrested in Denver on the 19th of September. But in New York, we still have a case. We were not ready to arrest Adis, and we were not ready to arrest Zareen. We needed more evidence. We wanted to see if they would slip up. Well, we waited 3 months or 4 months, and they did not. So we were going to get some information from Adis. We wanted to get his passport because we had seen his travel manifest, but we were afraid that we hadn't gotten everything. And so we wanted to see the stamps, and we got subpoenas. So on January 7th, we sent 2 agents over to Adis's house to get the passport. They give him the subpoena. Adis is actually fairly conversational. They go get the passport, and the agents go on their way. But when he saw the subpoena, it said that he was being investigated for terrorism, and it freaked him out. Minutes later, Adis came running out of the house, jumped in the car, and is racing away. That's not a good sign. He's going like a bat out of hell. The surveillance team is telling us that he's on the Whitestone Expressway. He calls into 911.
Police operator 1673. This is
He goes, "My name is Adis. My name is Adis. I love death more than you love life."
Hello, do you need the police, fire department, or the ambulance? Hello?
Adis believes that he's going to commit an act of jihad at this point. He's going to take out as many people as he can with his car. He's driving in one direction. Going in the same direction is a car in front of him. He goes and rams the car at 65 miles an hour, hitting a car going 55 miles an hour. Thankfully, he doesn't understand physics. Instead of the big explosion, which is what he's hoping for, he gets a fender bender. Adis gets out of the car and starts running for the median. There happens to be an off-duty Suffolk County police officer behind him. The Suffolk cop gets out of the car and basically yells to him, "Hey, buddy, you're involved in an accident. Get back over here." Adis comes back to the car. The cop goes, "Hey, it was a fender bender. Why are you running?" Adis said, "The FBI wants me for terrorism," and points behind him. The surveillance teams are now running up to where Adis is. The cop sees this, pulls out his gun, and tells him to lay down. We bring him back, put him in a room, agents go in and start to question him. He waives everything, and he starts to talk. And he tells us about Zazi. He tells us about Zareen. He tells us about the terrorist training camps when they were in Pakistan. He tells us that they wanted to blow up the subway. The plan with Al-Qaeda was that they were gonna be suicide bombers. Wear the backpacks, go into the subway, blow them up, 3 different locations.
Why did he tell you all that?
Because he was proud of it. He was bragging to us.
This attack could have very likely gone on undetected. We were days, if not hours, away from this thing happening.
At this point, because of everything Adis gave us, we placed him under arrest.
At or around the same time, they would arrest Zareen Ahmadze. He was driving in his cab. They pulled him out of his cab, placed him under arrest as well.
That was the culmination of a lot of hard work, but it's also the beginning of another chapter, and that is preparing a case for trial.
Najibullah Zazi and Zareen Ahmadze would eventually plead guilty. Well, Adis Mendunjanid would take his case to trial and would be convicted.
When we were coming to trial, we actually made a bomb according to Zazi's recipe. It had the force to blow up a subway car.
This was one of the most serious terrorist threats to our nation since September the 11th, 2001, and were it not for the combined efforts of the law enforcement and intelligence communities, it could have been devastating.
The fallout of this would have been New York shattering, if not America shattering. The way we work together with the intelligence community, with local law enforcement, I don't know how it can work better in a case like this. This was exemplary.
This wasn't the first threat after 9/11. There were a series of terrorist-related activities that FBI, NSA, and CIA had stopped. Some of these cases, like this one, we share because it was important for the American people to know that what the country was doing was to keep them safe, not to spy on them. And I believe that if it were not for the 702 program, that this attack would have happened.
Without the receipt of those initial emails, there would have been a very, very devastating attack that would have occurred in New York City. I'm 100% certain of that.
The Zazi case was the highlight of my FBI career. There's not a lot of cases where you go to bed at night and go, we saved a lot of lives today. And it's a pretty rewarding feeling to be able to say that.